I tell my kids, I said, it would be nothing for a carload of 4 people to pull up and 3 of them to buy the same cassette. That would never happen in the last 10 years. People would come from all around to shop at Phil's because they knew that, Billy and Shane and those guys stocked the right things. They would come in and, 3 kids would buy Green Day, Kerplunk, or 3 kids would come in and buy the same, cassette. Never happened again, but again, they all wanted it, and, you all had to have it, and so it was crazy how that would work. And now, 12 o'clock Thursday night, everything goes out to anybody that's on one of the services, and, Friday morning at 12, everything's out there, and if you subscribe to this thing, you get the new releases of anything, and there it is.
Good deal. We got Phil Breen on today from Phil's Records. I'm filling in for Mark Perkins. The last couple episodes he talked about this giant trip he's in Spain. So trying to do him justice while he's gone. I wanted to have you on for a long time. So I've been going to your place. I've been going to Phil's Records for probably as long as I can remember, most of my life, 30 years or so.
Love hearing that.
So anyways, what got you, aside from, I know you were working at a record store before you opened your own. You obviously had a passion for music before that.
Of course. And sports and music are my 2 passions. And if my build, I'm not going to make any money in sports. So the music thing, I worked for somebody for 10 years, a pretty well-established local record store in Erlanger. And then it was late 20s. It was time to do something. It was time to make a real move instead of being a record store manager, which was a glorious gig, but it really wasn't going to have a good future without the ownership. So a friend of mine's father had the jam at the bank, and we started to go off on our own and kept going for a while.
So, like in high school and stuff, did you work at a record store?
No, I started after I got out of college, or after I got out of high school, came back after a year in college and came back, and was that's when I started in '79 because I graduated high school in '77. So, a year away at college, should have stayed there. Came back, wasn't as good a student as my mother and father would have liked, and just went out there. I shopped there and kind of sold myself, and he hired me to do some crazy things like make buttons and buy bootleg albums out of the trunks of cars. And
I think we bought some of those bootleg records over there.
That was fun. That was, thinking back how, much trouble we could have got in if the right people would have known what we were doing. But it was what made independent stores different back then. It wasn't the same mall store where you get the hit of the day and the fluffy toy or the whatever else they sold there. We had Springsteen bootlegs and Zeppelin bootlegs, and
mostly is it like outtake stuff or like from shows?
No, mostly pure shows and occasionally some rarities. But I've always believed that the sound guys for some of these established acts were doing it with the entertainers. Okay, no one can tell me Springsteen sound man didn't know what he was doing, because that became a big part of the Springsteen mystique.
Oh, huge! Yeah,
the live albums that were there, and now heck, the XM channel can have so many live shows from every tour. Heck, I've got bootlegs from every tour on CD that, it just became an industry. And, obviously the Stones people, because soundboard shouldn't have been that easy to come by from the 70s and stuff. So, but it was great because, those bands became a little bit more popular because, of their live acts. And when they toured, they made, buckets of money, and it worked well for them and worked well for their customers. And it was a fun thing to do when you're in your early 20s buying bootleg albums from,
well, it's crazy because
traveling salesmen.
you beat the regular albums to death. And
sure.
I do, and then I kind of want something a little different. But I think I even bought Bruce Springsteen live in Cincinnati, Born in the USA tour at Phil's Records.
Yeah, because there became no one that would buy those bootlegs weren't going to buy your studio release.
Sure.
So they got a little touchy about it for years and thinking it was hurting them. And now, if they only would have known how easy it was to burn and copy their stuff, their regular stuff down the road, they would have never used that in much energy ticked off at that part of the business, when obviously people were on street corners with the newest rap release on every corner back in the day and just crushing, pirating was horrible. I wouldn't believe in that, but the bootlegs just enhanced the experience for that artist. And I will always say that should not have been anything close to their main worries. Pirating should have been, and the street corner guys that a new Jay-Z would come out and a guy would buy 50 blank CDs and they set up on the corner and
sell them.
So no one, so that's where the problem was.
I picked up a Grateful Dead release at your store on Friday, and it's like they're another one like, record all these shows. They didn't care if the fans did, and they trade them. But now
sure.
Made a legacy off just selling these old shows. Like I picked up something from May of '77, something from August of '90, and it's like you get like a feature length, 3-hour thing to kind of ride through.
Yeah, those bands, the Dead were the kings of it. They, they encouraged it, and again, their studio records didn't sell all that much, but they were always in people's eye because there was always tape trading, and they toured. What's often it was always a big part of what they did, and they made a lot of money by doing it that way.
So before you got into music, or the record store back in your youth, were you digging through your parents' collection or aunts and uncles and stuff? No?
Absolutely not. My dad loved music, but we would not have connected at all. He liked opera, big band, so maybe he gave me the music-loving gene, but no, because I ask that question all the time over the counter. When someone young will buy something that skews old or is old, I'll say, hey, cool dad, cool grandpa, cool uncle. I didn't have any of those things. Not at all. Tried to be that, maybe if, a couple of my nephews, but definitely not that. But my father had a passion for music, and maybe that's where I got it from, but definitely not from the parental units.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, okay. Yeah, mine was a lot of that, aunts and uncles.
I was envious of that because that was great, and I try to inflict my taste on my son, who is ate up with music, and he lets me in a little bit, but he wants to be the one that discovers it. Stubborn and extremely smart and well-rounded about it, but he wants to be the one that discovers it. So someday I'll find that person I can mentor.
That's cool. That's probably different with streaming now, but before streaming growing up, it's like going over to Aunt So-and-so's house.
Absolutely.
Like, what does she have? I'll dub this on cassette, and if I hate it, whatever, but it's something new to check out. And
Correct. Because they have so much access to anything they want now, and especially if they're smart enough to know how to eliminate the nonsense and get right to what they like some of the stream recommendations that some of these places provide now. It's scary how good they are. Like I said, my son, very, very smart, and he raves on how well thought out the playlist that I think he's a Spotify guy, and that offer him once a week, and it's crazy, the algorithms and the thought that goes into that, because for years the record industry, if you paid your way through, you could get a hit. Back in the 80s and 90s, the best things weren't number one. A lot of it were paid for, and that's what everyone says, that like when the beginning of the streaming, the record labels would pay to be, you click on I like hard rock and it'd be their releases type thing. And now it's luckily branching out, so quality bands can get attention by the right, I guess, for lack of a better term, algorithms or whatever on these streaming services. And so they develop quite the following. It helps them when they tour. Doesn't help them in the wallet because the streaming doesn't pay them anything, but the exposure is so much easier to get to now. Because like when you said, the cool uncle, that used to be the person behind the counter, used to be the one that, now I won't say tastemaker, but you could certainly nudge people in the right direction. Now, recommend it if you like, or that algorithm will say, okay, you've been listening to this, you're going to like this, and it's pretty well done now, and they're usually right.
I was talking to a guy last week. Do you think because record sales so down for an artist, if that used to be the way they made their money?
Really?
Why? Right. Yeah, same.
Shocking.
But do you think that's why ticket prices are maybe through the roof on some of those things? Because it's the only way they can.
Of course it is. Because again, you have no way to get in people's wallet with your music now, or very hard. I mean, it's so many people stream that the amount you get from that. So yes, you have got to be compensated for your abilities. And no one wants to tour as much as you have to make money now, but that's why shirt prices are up, the merch is up, the ticket prices are way up, and the venues and the booking agencies are taking their share, and it's nasty compared to the old days. Ask anybody anywhere near my age to whip out their book of ticket stubs, and it would shock a young person. Some of the bands they've heard of that, parents and uncles and grandparents saw back when they were their age, and how much we had to spend.
6, 7, 8 bucks.
I have 2 Springsteen shows where I spent less than 10.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy to think. But it is what it is, and it's so these bands have way more ability to expose their music to people, but hardly any way to get in people's wallets. It's hard.
I was reading No Depression too, that venues are trying to take 20-25% of the merch stuff now.
And the better artists or the smarter artists and the ones with the best management are telling them no, and it's a stalemate sometimes. Absolutely, I see it. No, back in the day, Buffett was getting cuts on the beer at Riverbend.
Oh, really?
He was so strong. Yeah, you're going to get that many people to come see me. I'm going to make sure I'm rewarded, because they didn't really jack up the prices too much on the regular market. Maybe secondhand when he was at his peak did, but I was told he got a little bit of maybe not everything, but like whatever beer was sponsoring that show and stuff. And so yeah, these artists have to do something to make up for the lack of CD sales and stuff like that. No question.
And you used to sell tickets for Ticketmaster.
Yeah, I had 6 stores at one time. All were Ticketmasters, and that was a headache. Older women wanted to sit on the conductor's laps. I want to go see a symphony. I want to be right here. Those kind of are gone, ma'am. Why not? Things like that. And then the one I talk about all the time is the Buffett show, where we had 5 shows, and only one person in line got pavilion, and everyone else had lawn. And that was how crazy demand it was. So, probably had a few hundred. Well, I know we had a few hundred people in our parking lot, and we did the lottery number, and they just sat there, and the smart kids that worked for me could do the tickets as fast as they could, and pavilion sold out immediately after one transaction. And
because he was here 5 nights in a row, right?
Oh yeah. And that was I guess the early '90s or whatever. It was very famous, and he was on top of the world back then. But now, he's down to 1. But back then, it was absolutely, the ticket demand was fever pitch, like nothing that's really happened around now. Because I don't know anybody that's played Riverbend for multiple nights like that ever since. And for a time and place, he was as big as it got. And owning ticket places back then was not much fun, and it may not be as corrupt as it is now, but it was certainly not. It wasn't a real fair deal.
How did the lottery number work back then?
Well, you look kind of gauged, like that day. I remember we kind of gauged somebody was there. It was probably, I think it was over 400 something, and so you did that and put in a hopper, and just everyone had a number as they came in, and then it was obviously 2-sided ticket or whatever, and we count them, and then we put them in a hopper, and then whoever got, like, say 150 was first, and 151 was second, and 149 was in the line for sure. So they had ways they did it. I mean, it's just Ticketmaster evolved back then. They obviously then it was a free for all, because after a while, we had a couple locations where people from out of town, like there was a guy from, I think it was Pittsburgh, would come down because we were easy to get to from you can get to Cincinnati from anywhere, and we weren't really doing a whole lot of business. And like say a Pittsburgh on sale would come on at 10 o'clock, and he'd be right there. He'd be the only person in front of the Ticketmaster computer. So when pick a guy that was big, and I think it was Garth Brooks was a big one, or McCartney or somebody in Pittsburgh, this scalper was there with the cash in hand, because we couldn't do anything on credit back then, and just it was all cash and boom, 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 boom. And so they had ways around that. Then Ticketmaster started getting smarter and doing it by area codes and for on sales and things like that. But obviously you don't know when it's cash at the door. You can't do it that way. So
because it couldn't have been cheap to host Ticketmaster, right?
No, you had to pay for the phone line, and each time, and the thing was you're responsible for everything, because once your computer came on and something went out, you're responsible for that. So no matter what, there was no take backs. There was no, hey, I'm sorry, she changed her mind. Because that was, to put them back in the system was a nightmare. But you're responsible for everything. So Buffett days, heck, we had Brinks trucks come by, because it was, you figure hell, at Fort Thomas store that day with 5 people, we sold one set of pavilion and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pairs and 4s and 8s of lawn. So it was several $1,000s, and I was responsible for every nickel of it. And I might get 20-30 cents a ticket, which was kind of crazy. And you couldn't do any business during an on sale, so your business basically wasn't open that hour or 2 hours, whatever. And
150 people in the parking lot trying not to get robbed.
It was more than that. I mean, it was at that time, it was way more than that. But you're responsible for all that money too, and so it's fun, and it got me a lot of attention. But to answer your original question a few minutes ago, it really wasn't the greatest thing to have. It certainly didn't make you money. It got you attention, and I was on the news a couple times, and people said, "Oh, I remember camping out in front of your place." It provided good memories for people, but memories don't pay the bills. Sure.
And if you're on the end of like, oh, misplaced for U2 tickets or something, wasn't there something crazy like that? And it's like, man, it's coming out of the till.
Absolutely, it would be, because it was kind of stressful when you would run the report at the end of the day with the amount you brought in, and you hope like heck the people worked for you, or you didn't screw up, because there was no I don't know what happened, Ticketmaster.
That's crazy. I think I've only been in 2 lotteries in my life. One was probably McCartney in '93, standing outside your place, I think, and then the other time I probably felt like the the zip code guy or area code guy. I drove down to Knoxville, stood outside of a record store called the Disc Exchange trying to get lottery tickets when the V-Roys got back together, like, I don't know, 10, 11 years ago for like a New Year's show down there. And then last minute decided to pull off a Southgate house before the original Southgate house closed. So, like, got to see him twice in a week. But
V-Roy's near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, let's hear about that, because you had a 10th anniversary.
Yeah, so I started my first store in 1989 in Fort Thomas, 1990 in Fort Mitchell, and then in 91 I opened 4 stores. All went into Sight and Sound stores that were a big electronics place in the greater Cincinnati area, and got married all in about a 4-month period. I got married and opened 4 complete more stores. Pretty crazy in 1991. But so in 1999 I had a 10th year anniversary concert at Moonlite Gardens over there at Coney with Shaver, Billy Joe Shaver, the V-Roys, who were huge in this town. As obviously you're an Uber fan yourself. They had sold out Southgate House probably 6-7 times in a year or two before that. So it was free, but you had to get a ticket at one of my stores, and it was a crazy night. We put about 1,200 people through the door that day at Coney, which if you'd had to pay for it, I'm sure it would have never been that big. And people came and went, and it was a lot of time, a lot of fun, and I got on the mic and thanked people and stuff like that. And that was, a lot of attention for the store, and that was one of the highlights of my music career, selling music career, having people that still talked about that. And that's, 24 years, about now 23 years away, or ago rather. It was so much fun that, V-Roys were so big then, and a lot of people came to see them, and Shaver was a alt country legend, and it was a great time
Rest
for
in
me.
peace.
Yeah, it was a great time. They were great guys. They enjoyed the perks. As I tell people all the time, Montgomery Inn was the backstage thing, and they really took care of me at Coney. My friend Jim was, high up there, and they really took care of us. And he told me when it was over, he said, "Phil, you can have this every weekend if you want," because the arrangement was they didn't charge me for the venue, which was great, but they got the bar, and they had tickets, and they said, "No, you ran about 1,200 people through there, and they all had fun, so you can do this every week if you want."
Oh, cool. So when are you doing it again?
Heck no, that was tough. I got some more stories I probably shouldn't tell about how that came about, but they were so much. It was so much fun because they backstage before the show, and heck, they were about my age, so it was fun to hang with the V-Roys guys, and it was a good time. And then Shaver, who was the headliner, even though more people came to see V-Roys, and Billy Joe's son Eddie was just an amazing guitar player that half the world thought was a guitar god, but he couldn't have cared less about high-fiving or hobnobbing with anybody. He certainly just did his job, and he had what he liked to do, and but that it was and he passed about a year after that, so it was a fantastic show. I mean, they both they both don't usually play in front of that size crowd at that stage of their career, so it was a great show, a lot of fun.
Because even Southgate House wasn't holding 1,200 people, right?
About maybe 6, and yours jammed.
Yeah.
So in Moonlight Gardens, it was, like I said, they came and went, but there was a lot of people there, and it was people still remember that show, and that's a long time ago. So I do, but it was great.
Do they do anything at Moonlight Gardens anymore?
Very little. It's some wedding receptions maybe, and
I remember like maybe Old Crow was there maybe like 10 years ago, but I hadn't heard anything about it in a long time.
When I think Coney changed hands, I don't think the new management wanted to have concerts a few years ago. I think that happened. I may be wrong, but I don't think there's much there.
Tear down the rides, tear down the
it's just
bandstand.
It was fun because there used to be some blues shows that would be there, but again, it was a big crowd there because obviously it was a free ticket and something I always wanted to do. And
what are some more of these wild stories?
That I paid him in cash, and that when Billy Joe pulled into the parking lot, I handed him his money, and he has this reputation. Well, he did have a reputation of being very God-fearing and very straight shooting, and he looked me right in the eye and yelled at me, "Son, you never pay a man till the job's done." He goes, "I'll be back because I'm a man of the Lord, but you shouldn't." I'm carrying around all this cash in my pocket that I kind of, saved for about 2 years, and I wanted to maybe drink a little bit, and I wanted to get that cash out of my pocket. The V-Roys took it, and I told him about the backstage with Montgomery Inn and free beer, and like the Roadrunner, those 4 guys were upstairs drinking and eating Montgomery Inn, and Billy Joe left and went to Burger King. Didn't even come back for the spread.
Went to Burger King.
Crazy, but yeah, he yelled at me for paying him before the show.
Wow.
Because you hear all these stories about, you had to pay James Brown, you had to do this in cash. I had the cash, and he screamed at me.
You wait. Yeah.
Never pay a man till the job's done. Well, I'm not sure what shape I'll be in 3 hours, so I'd like you to take this money now, sir.
Back to the shop or your store, the one thing that I was kind of trying to figure out is like, because you do used stuff and new stuff,
oh, sure.
And then I've probably bought way more used stuff just because you never know what you're going to find. And it's like even when I go in there now, like if I have something on my mind, I probably won't buy it even if I see it because I'll find something else. It's like, bingo.
That is absolutely the game plan for having a store, especially now because you can get so much online, but especially new, you can order it Amazon, gas is what it is. But used, if you never know what you're going to find in the store, you hope people will appreciate that when they come in, or will make the effort to come in. Because again, the traffic isn't anything like it used to be, but there's so much stuff crammed in that place now that you never know what you're going to find, and people are very appreciative of it if you can take the time to do it. But times obviously changed, and when you can have any song you want to at your disposal, but for the people that want to own it,
right,
you never know what you're going to find, and that's the only reason I'm still around, because Phil's couldn't survive without new or used either CDs or albums right now. You need it all to scratch out.
So even like the new stuff, how do you know what to purchase and like how much?
Well, I've been doing this for a long, long time, but I certainly buy a whole lot less than I used to. We used to have a real wide selection of new, and honestly, anytime you get a little bit of money ahead, you try to get more albums, because the album selection seems to be way more important to people. They kind of expect CDs not to be, I don't carry deep as catalog as I used to, but I still have quite a few. And it's a lot easier to get CDs when you order them, because they're a lot easier to replenish for the industry than albums, because pressing plants are harder than, the
right,
CD reproduction. So it's easier to get the CDs back in when you don't have them. And, I still have more than any other place around, because the big marketplace, the Targets, the Walmarts, a few hits, and that's it, because they've done the math. They're smart enough to go over the wall. I wasn't. So it's there's so much ways not to spend money that it's silly to have so much. But if you're a record store, you need to have some. But I do. But it's have like the hits and the tried and true classics where 15, 20 years ago I'd go a lot deeper and it would work. Now it's, if you're going to go deeper with money, you want to have more albums than CDs.
But even some of, I think I go obscure, but then I still find stuff that's even way more obscure. It's like, man, how did he even know to order this? Because you say back in the day, whatever you didn't sell, they would let you.
Well, CDs, you still have 10% return percentage on what you spend from the distributorship, but you can't do anything with albums, so that doesn't affect it. So there's no returning any albums, and that new, or if they're defective, you have to deal with the labels themselves, because in the record industry says, hey, if you had a generous return allowance, the Walmarts of the world would be in it stronger than they are, and there probably wouldn't be record stores, because they've successfully run out on lots of other different types of businesses by lowballing and having more buying power and better connections with suppliers. So I see their point, but it would be nice to be able to return a new album, because I'd be definitely more likely to carry a wider variety if I could return things. I'd take more chances. But you have to take some chances, and you want to have someone catch your eye. Wow, I can't believe Phil has this. And all the time, like the new hip stuff that comes out, that that might be on like the cool, the pastes or the stereo gum sites that the young cool kids like. Someone will find those and say, that's great, you have this, and they'll think I really know what that is, and I'll say, I've got a smart son that he tells me to buy this stuff, or my daughter says, yeah, everyone's liking this. So this didn't come from my knowledge, this came from knowing where to look, or having children that say, yeah, Dad, you probably need this. But again, I'd rather sell that than the basic hits of the day, because obviously everyone can do that. And for years we've had a very, very strong hard rock presence from Jump Street, from back in the days, and people really are happy that someone carries that much hard rock, because that genre is definitely supported more than any other genre, and certainly in my business, at Phil's Records, that hard rockers have been loyal to the physical product way more than indie rock or classic rock. I'm worried that there's not enough young kids that are really into the hard rock like their dads and cool uncles. But absolutely, I will go deeper with that, and those people still way, way more supportive of physical media than the standard rock or mainstream country and things like. It's easier to find, I guess, on the services maybe. But so yeah, that's a big part of what we do as far as, and to answer your question, as far as what to order, hit and miss, but I've done this long enough, and you kind of learn a few tricks on what's work. Because again, if you have more than you're selling, inventory isn't good. My bride's a CPA, and I hear it all the time. You don't need that. You don't need that. So.
Marry the accountant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Back when I'd be digging through records, cassettes, CDs, and stuff, and you see like the drill hole or the saw mark, is that all stuff that got sent back?
No,
to the
that was what they did for promos, so you couldn't return them for full credit. Because you had to mark it some way, or if promos came and looked just like the regular one, even though they probably were a regular release, you had to differentiate, so you couldn't. You were given the promos, and if they didn't put a saw hole or a stamp on it, you could return it, or you would be able to return it for full credit, and that wouldn't have worked. So way more often than not, that meant it was a promo. Now, after the fact, called cutouts, when they had overstock and they said, oh, well, we're sitting on 50,000 of this guy, and it stopped selling more than about 100, 500 a week. Cash flow, we have to cut them out. So they will. Then that's when you'd see, like you said, the saw holes or whatever. It would mean at that point would mean cutout, which they would sell them to, clearinghouses cheaper, and they technically would go out of print. So you had to make sure you couldn't return it, because the return percentage got in trouble back in the day when stores would ask for, they would buy used records and then return them as defective, and places abused that privilege so bad that the label said, can't do this, so they basically killed return percentage for albums years ago. And that's, we all kind of suffered for that, because those plants aren't infallible. There's always going to be, a handful of bad presses, but I'm too small to be able to eat that. Amazon's not, so I guess they'll return things, but all stores, we're not allowed to. We're not allowed to. We don't get credit for it, so I'm too small to be able to pay for the mistake of the label suppressing plant. So
I listened to an interview with you earlier in the year where talking about like a corporate record store versus an indie record store. The corporate guys like telling you what you're allowed to advertise and probably sending all the pop-ups and stuff that you put the CDs or records in.
Oh yeah, back in the day, sure. Yeah, so the mall stores got advantages none of us used to get, and then some of the better independent stores started coalitions and stuff, and it was basically a well-run record industry for cool stores, I guess. I was never in any of the strong ones like that, but a couple of Cincinnati stores were, and some of the ones around, and they did a lot of good, but then they became just as high business. If you have to get a box of promos if you're going to come to this town, it became less about helping the artists and more about sustaining their shops, and everything changes in this business.
But because of this, you can decorate your shop any way you want, and nobody's going to tell you that.
No one tells me what to put up. That's people sit there and look around saying, what do you? There's no rhyme or reason. I just put stuff up for no reason. Albums. Like I say, I just have an album cover. I like that picture. I'll cut around it and slap it on the wall. And my daughter hung a bunch of CD covers all up and down the wall. It's just decorative. Because back in the day, you used to get paid for placement on posters, and like you were trying to say, end caps. Like back when you had tons of inventory, the stores that did a lot of action would get money to put, say, the new whoever, REO Speedwagon in front, and they would call them end caps. And if you put a poster in the wall, poster in the window, people saw it. But back then, records and CDs sold so much that there was some logic to that from the record labels. Now, that'd be silly to pay someone to carry your stuff, because not near enough sales are going to ever come of it.
Even used stuff. I've spent enough time in record stores to always see the guy that backs up the minivan with crates of stuff that he's ready to cash in, and probably some good stuff, but a lot of times there's probably crap.
Well, that's obviously, if there was a magic way to make everything come through your door in guaranteeable shape, sign me up, because the anticipation when you see someone come up like that is always great, whether it be a customer in a store seeing that, or whether it be me as the merchant. But man, so often they're not guaranteeable, or and it happens with CDs too. It's like that's your life's blood turning product, and getting it out of someone's house that's not going to use it into somebody younger, or that's going to appreciate it. And I say this all the time. Also, where a lot of the biggest collections I've ever got are when near and dear to me customers have passed, and either sold them for their widows or offspring and things like that. And it's better than that gets them in, I call Gen Pop. The kids and the fans are going to get these great collection that these people have spent their whole life compiling, and it beats being in someone's basement or in a room that no one's ever going to go in. But yes, the amount of records that come through that aren't guaranteeable, it's crushing to see. People say, why don't you have any Kiss records? Kiss people like to party. Think about every time you ever heard a Kiss record. Oh yeah. And, that stops them in their tracks all the time. It's the way of the world. It's
and their stuff's always pricey, new or used.
Supply and demand, because obviously so many of those things that we didn't know to take care of, records being one of them, comics, baseball cards. Now the collectability is in condition, and it has to be, because you can get any song you want to without having to pay a bunch of money for a used Kiss album, or now parents will come in for their kids, and new record prices are way too high. They'll come in and say, well, my daughter wants Taylor Swift. Do you have anything used? And you have to explain to them, well, she came along after people bought records, pretty much, and people are spending $40-50 for Taylor Swift. They're not going to turn around and sell it to a store if they don't like it, and things like that. And people, or they'll come in and say, "Oh yeah, my son got a turntable," and they say, "Well, likes Led Zeppelin. Do you have any used?" And I'll say, "Well, this an original Led Zeppelin would be 2 or 3 times, maybe 4 times the value of what that's new, better sounding new issue is going to be." So it's you have to educate and then go from there.
It's a weird battle. I think when I got the Bowie discography, a few years ago on LP, it's like I can try to dig out some original releases, but it's like it is kind of nice, $22, open up a fresh one that I can take care of forever, and it sounds great right off the bat without somebody else's party stains or whatever on them.
And that's the two sides of this business right now: the originals, the collectabilities, or the people that still want the music in that format. Because my brother's strong in comic books, and he's a comic book world, and same thing. There's reissues where you're reading the exact same thing, or whatever they call the ones they put out after the fact, that it looks exactly like the ones that you could have bought years ago. But the ones you bought years ago can go for 4 figures. Where this, whatever, I forget what the word's called, is a few bucks. You're getting the exact same story, but the collectors are spending that money for when that came out. And that's very important to some of these record buyers, that they want the originals, but the first thing they teach in economics class, supply and demand. And so, you just don't see as much of them anymore. And so an original in great shape is going to go for much more than the reissue that they can keep pressing.
Sure. Or some of it if you're in the limbo of waiting for a reissue.
Oh, sure.
I think when I was in college, I got Tom Waits' Closing Time and Nighthawks at the Diner. It's like one was 20 and one was 40. And that's before stuff took off and was like, you never see $17 on a Rumors copy ever. It'd be like in the $2 bin.
Absolutely.
And sold a gazillion.
Now you can sell it 15, 17 in your sleep.
Yeah.
But that's the other thing, is they're really coy about a lot of the classic rock, what it's available to buy. Or like Steely Dan, there's the first one, that's the only thing you can buy right now. Little Feat, there's lots of things that you just don't have, that have never been reissued, and you don't know whether it's contractual from back in the day. It's really weird to think that you can't just go into a record store and buy on the hottest format, which is vinyl, a lot of things you want to get. And I complain a lot about restocks and stuff, and it was much better this year than last year, and they're fixing it, and it still has a long way to go, because I know what I need to order. I know I should always have Dark Side of the Moon. I know I should always have The Wall. I know I should always have Cage the Elephant Stack, things like that. But sometimes you don't have them. Tyler Childers is as hot as could be right now. I'll order 2 or 3 of his, and it's under $20, which is glorious. A lot of things aren't, and they sell, and then I go a few weeks without them. And I don't have the money to buy 10 when I can. Some stores do, I don't. So that part's tough, but it's definitely a work in progress. If there's going to be a survival to that industry, there has to be.
Because sometimes there's no rhyme or reason. You would think it'd be a hot release, like why hasn't this been pressed yet? And it's like even then. Yeah, Phil, why is Closing Time $20? And you're like, well, how many do you think they sold, and how many do you think are still around?
Oh, sure.
He's not your multi.
Right, and then who they decide to reissue, like Tom Waits, a perfect example. A lot of people came out to him after the fact. When he was out the first time, he didn't sell that much, but he became Critics' Darling. He was on Epitaph Records for a while, and all the cool kids said, "Oh, this old man with a gravelly voice is cool as hell." And so then obviously people wanted it. Stevie Ray, when he was alive, didn't sell much, but for the 6, 8, 10 years after he passed, as hot as could be. So there's lots of different factors. Death is good for record sales. Any of the superstars, obviously, you get a bump. But again, when you said no rhyme or reason, if I had $1 for every time I said that, I'd be a rich man.
Hopefully you'd still be sitting here with me, though. No, it's weird because I think all of Waits stuff has been reissued, sometimes a couple, but still waiting on Bone Machine, Black Rider. I think there was another one from the early 90s that Island hasn't reissued yet.
Correct, but he's also went from Island to Epitaph. So a lot of it is I don't think some of the contracts they signed back in the day took into contingencies. I know that was a big thing where no one thought that CDs would come along. So a lot of the contracts for recorded music didn't include that caveat of something that could be basically just pressed at the drop of a hat, CD reproduction. And then obviously CDs sold more than records did, from Jump Street. I mean, obviously records in the 70s sold a ton of music. Some of the stories that the people told where I used to get my stuff would just freak people out if they knew, Swallens Records was big back in the day, and they talked about Frampton Comes Alive. You said that about Rumors, some of these things. They would get skids of just those titles. And so, boxes of 30, and they would get a skid. So like, there's 20 boxes of 30, and you'd make a display out of just Frampton Comes Alive or just Fleetwood Mac Rumors, and you walk in a department store and there'd be the size of a skid, and they would do creative displays with just one title. I don't think there's anything that we sold 30 of in a given year, because there's no such thing as hits anymore.
Even your biggest people like Taylor Swift or Harry Styles or something.
Correct. They didn't sell 1 million physical copies this year. Supposedly Taylor Swift might have, but she also had 6 different versions of her record and got all the little girls to get their moms to buy all 6 and stuff, and she had to press them up. And so someone told me that Taylor Swift probably got to 1 million physical sales in 2022. I don't think there's anything in 2020 or 2021. Whereas years past, like in the early 90s, in the boom of this business, I'm sure 200, 300, 400 releases shipped over 1 million when they left day one. And the story I beat to death at work is everyone knows who Taylor Swift is. She's the biggest person. Harry Styles probably 1A, and she did not ever sell 2 million physical copies. Shania Twain was the biggest thing in the early 90s. Pretty Girl, Country, blah blah blah, and she had back-to-back records that sold over 20 million copies. Say you got, I'm sure she probably got more, but say $3 a disc. Shania's accountant is working 60 million twice. Taylor's is working 6 million twice. Now, no one's going to feel sorry for Taylor Swift. She's on too many commercials and all the other lines that make her money, but that kind of puts in perspective how little the physical media is selling now compared to the golden ages in the 90s before burning and digital and
Sure.
streaming. Because back then, heck, I had 6 stores in one little area here, and there was probably 30, 40 places easy that also sold music. Chains, lots of record stores. I mean, it was crazy how much stuff was out then. It was an excess, like, the labels just would sign anybody. Someone had a big hit, the Knack had a big hit. Every label had to have their, the Knack.
Right.
Pick anyone, obviously when Nirvana hit in the early 90s, everyone had to have their grunge thing, and every label would sign 3 or 4 people trying to tap into what happened organically with, some great band that really caught people's ears and eyes. So it was crazy. So now it's really, really hard for any of these people to sell any kind of big number.
Yeah, then everyone cashed in their CD collections, and The Woman in Me or whatever, all the Shania ones are like just sitting in a used bin for a few bucks. And
but the money's been spent.
Yeah,
I'm
they
sure.
made their money.
Certainly.
And then you still get to tap into the secondary market.
No, secondary market's only thing that's kept Phil alive for a long, long time. Couldn't have survived without it. Because again, I remember before I even worked at Record Alley, I worked downtown, and I would take lunch, and at this place we got 30 minutes, wink wink, maybe 40 minutes. I have time to go from Central Avenue up to Clifton to the record stores back then, Moles and Ozark, and used records were everywhere. And so if I had $10, I get 3, 4, 5 records that some of them weren't even out yet, and come back. And that's how I developed the stock. And heck, when I started my store in 1989, I put in probably like 3,000 of my own records for the stock. It was 95% probably bought on the secondhand market, because heck, I couldn't afford to buy new stuff. Even when I worked at Record Alley, I would get promos and things like that and buy them used and take them home, and then that's what and then as a collector, I'd go to other stores. I used to love traveling to all the cities and going to their record stores. But when it came to time to open my store, it's like, I guess I have to have some stock, or it's going to be just like any other bad mall store. So I put in my stock and never looked back.
What was it with those? There's a lot of them in my dad's collection, my uncle's collection, but like.
So you're fortunate enough to have a cool dad and cool uncle.
I got a couple cool uncles, a couple cool aunts. Lucky enough.
I met your father. He says he seemed like he had some good taste. So
yeah, he helped all this. That's why I'm broke. If I dig through like even their 8-track collection, they'd be like, oh well, this is All Things Must Pass, but it's like the version we got at Sid's for like half price up in Erlanger. And then he said you could, if an 8-track was $5 or $6, he'd have his own like whatever bootleg ones you could buy for $3.
See, I would never do that. That's going to the pirating thing. But yeah. So
that was before you were in business, so did you have any of those back in the day?
No, I had an 8-track in my car when I was a senior in high school. And another story I say all the time is Dixie Heights, class of 77. If you saw the parking lot at my grades or my high school, it would be McDonald's cups and bags and throwing out 8-tracks that broke. Pull them out of the car, say the cuss word, throw it on the ground, and
hey, Jude Nebraxis on the side of the road.
Yeah, there goes $3 or $4 that you'll never get back because it was the stupidest format in music history.
What were you driving in high school?
I think a Capri, or an old Cutlass too. I think I had 2 cars in high school that neither one worth a damn, but both had 8-tracks. And you think any of your listeners or your watchers here are even gonna know what 8-tracks are?
If they don't,
I put them up in the store, and I love when people say, "Dad, what's this?" And you see people laugh these are 8-tracks, son, or these are 8-tracks, grandson, and just, explaining to them, yeah, it's going to make a kunk sound, and, the music's going to stop, and then it's going to start again, and stupid format. But
And the track listing's all shuffled up.
oh, sure.
I saw the Sgt. Pepper shirt somebody was selling online, and it looked like the 8-track label. And the first thing I noticed is like, this is the right song track list. They didn't do it right. They didn't do their homework.
Yeah.
Two things. One, we got to mention your brother Eric, because he never gets mentioned. And I told him on Friday when I saw him that we'd
I mentioned he's
give him a prop.
book price for Comic Book World. He's happy now. He's great at what he does, but that's another tough business that's run into troubles by digital, and people digitally copy the new books when they came out, and so you can read them online, which is to me appalling. But his business, it's changed, and the Marvel superheroes aren't the big things anymore, and he kind of wails on what's happened to his industry, and
And he was, how do you put it, the son your mother should have had first?
I don't agree with that, but
So one of my biggest pet peeves, I mean, I've been collecting records forever, in fact, so long, and I have so many that, like, and it's weird how many of them have Phil stickers. It's like, I think I got a Dark Side of the Moon not Dark Side, I got The Wall, late 90s, I think it was $5.99. And it's like, and it was like great condition, all the inserts and stuff.
You just can't ever, people come in with stickers, and I always took mine off immediately, but some people kept them on, and it's crazy to see what we got. I mean, in both ways. Like, I'll look at someone bring in like a Shania Twain CD, and you get $9.99 in its prime, and now I just laugh. I go, I can dig out 10 of them, drop the the second 9, and it's 99 cents here now. I mean, it's crazy what we were able to get for things. And I say all the time, my dollar bin with used CDs now, it's all stuff I would get 4, 5, 6 for 10 years ago, but now, great stuff sits there for 99 cents because the times changed.
What do you think of Record Store Day?
Not a big fan.
I absolutely hate it.
Not quite that bad yet, but when it first came out, it was to try to draw traffic into stores like mine, and then it instantly became a place where collectors thought they could make money, and truly they limited some of the bigger releases. They've gotten better at that, but some of the bigger releases they limited and created almost a instant collectible thing. Like, there's going back a few years, like 21 Pilots had a big release, Taylor Swift had a big release. All the kids wanted. They were so limited. I might have put in for 10 or 15 and got 2, and it's not the spirit of what it should be, which is to get people into independently owned stores. Same thing whether obviously I champion it, but it was meant to help us, and it just became another, I won't say money grab, but something silly the labels did that I just don't think the spirit's there anymore.
Yeah, because then you have the limited release, and then again the supply and demand, so you're paying double what you would have if they would have just put out a standard release of it.
And then again, they limited the amounts, but they've been better in the last go rounds. But I don't hit it near as hard as some of the other stores do because again, with records you have to buy them outright. There's no returning. So if you have a crate or two, or some stores multiple crates, the weekend after Record Store Day, you bought all those, folks. Nothing is going to sell as quick as the day of Record Store Day. So I get mad when I have a half a crate left or even less, and other places have way, way more.
And you'll see them like kind of discounted, or like, here's the Record Store Day 2019 or whatever, and
Sure.
It's like.
But some of them, became collectibles, which is cool. But the spirit of it isn't the same. I mean, I respect anything that's started to try to draw traffic into an independent, because whether it be an independent restaurant, bar, coffee shop, whatever, we need any kind of help because we don't have the same built-in advantages of the national powerhouses, whether it be advertising or name recognition. So that part I respected and appreciated. But when it became, too big for its britches, I don't know. I just didn't.
Kind of slimy.
That might be strong, but again, it's just not. It's not what it was like years ago, and I truly don't participate like some of the other stores do, and I won't because, heck, I just don't have that kind of bank account where some of these other stores that are, have more built-in scenesters, for lack of a better term, and they do better, and good for them. I hope every record store does great because that's the only way these artists can be fairly compensated for what they do. People say, well, sometimes people come in almost feel sorry that they bought something in another place. They go, that guy used to work for me. That store's great. That store does more than I'll ever think of doing. Or the guys down in Newport, good for them. They great guys, and they wanted to start one. It's the same thing I did. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I hope all record stores do well. People stream, and less people punch Amazon and have it delivered and things like that. So I'm positively pro competitors now. Now, back in the early 90s when we all had it, absolutely not. But now, I wish them all the best, and I hope everyone stops, goes and shops record stores versus Amazon if they can.
Yeah, because, I'd always try to get, what do you want for Christmas? Just give me gift cards to Phil's, because, back in the 90s, $20 to Phil's, I could walk out with like 6 things or go to Best Buy and buy 1 or 2.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, since we're doing this right after Christmas, that it really hits home how important gift cards used to be, because there's no sizes with music. And so gift cards were, 22nd, 23rd, 24th were crazy. You literally had someone writing them all day, and I'm sure other stores did now. Hell, the weather hit on 23rd, and I didn't open, and it was really, it didn't even bother me, because if it had been 20 years ago, I probably would have spent the night in my store the night before, so I could have been there. This time, with what's the changes in the industry, it wasn't fun to not be open, but it certainly didn't keep me up that night, not being able to come down here when it was, 20, 40 below wind chills. Yeah, but again, on December 23rd, back when, before Alexa, Phil would have spent the night on the 22nd to make sure he could have been there, because again, you could not, but now it's not the same. And the amount of gift cards now versus, like, again, I keep going back to the prime, the early 90s, nothing even close.
Looks like some of it's kind of on the upswing. Like I used to be able to walk into a shop and like, oh, it's just me for the next 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Now you walk in there tripping over dudes laying on the floor, like, going through the discount bins or whatever. And
the size of the store, it's what I can afford now. Great landlords, but it's all I can afford. So people are going to trip over people, and there's going to be stuff everywhere. Because, again, another thing I've always said is I refuse to think selection's not a good thing, because people say, why do you have this many CDs? Why not? If I can shove them in there somewhere, because, again, selection's a good thing, especially if they're going to get money off, because obviously they're not buying them new. So
there's somebody's bringing in a giant collection, probably easier to give them a flat rate versus trying to pick out stuff, or no?
It depends on how because sometimes if they want me to do it that way, I kind of gauge them, because a lot of times I will take them off their hands, and then a lot of it goes right to the dollar bin. And again, I used to check, like, heck, back when we had multiple stores, you could divvy up among stores if you had a couple of the same thing. I'd have transfer boxes. Now I'm sure there's things, probably Shania Twain, like you said, that I have.
There's a few.
Yeah, they have extras. Yeah, and I just don't have the time to check every one like that. And a lot of times people say, well, yeah, I can go X amount for the cherry picked ones, or a little bit more for everything. And a lot of times you'd be shocked at how many people from 30 on up that are happy, put it all on their phone, or all on hard drives and thumb drives and any other kind of drive, because heck, you can't put it. 5 years I think it's been since CD players were options in cars. So even people,
mine was the last year. My wife's car was the last year for it. And my car was the last year for a CD player.
Yeah, but even people my age are getting more and more hip to putting all their stuff on something that's so transportable, and so CDs become not the most important thing. And again, it's like I said, nothing close to what they used to sell. Like so, but again, if you can buy things for $1 or $2, or cheaper, heck, some people, not near as many, but some people still respect it and appreciate it.
There were years where I'd buy 100 CDs a year easy.
Oh yeah.
And then now, like, I think I bought 7 last year, maybe, because that Tom Petty put out that Fillmore set, and it's like, man, I can't dump $250 on the LPs for this, but right. CDs were maybe $50.
Yep. And again, we also all get older, and we have so much. That's the other part. A lot of people kind of come to the realization, there's only so much time in the day, and we're all so much busier than we were years ago. Mm-hmm. Everyone's busier than they were time. Everyone is. So heck, you look at how many you have, it's like, gosh, do I even need more? Thank God there's some people that are compulsive. Lots of my regulars, I almost would have to say of over half the people I see more than, say, once every other week, compulsive would be a good word for them, because they kind of have to have something new. Yeah. And that's been the way they've been wired for years, and thank God for it. Cause,
I don't gamble, but...
yeah, nor do I.
Yeah, I think the first... You were up the street in Latonia more, but I think that was like my first trip after I got my license. Like, we're driving to the record store. I had to get on 275 from Union, and we went out there. That place was enormous. Yeah,
that was fun, and I wish we would have, in hindsight, I wish we'd have found a better place to put it, because it was basically like a half-price books run by someone that had a passion for the business they were in, not, a money grab, because I bought out a great independent bookstore that had kind of gone under, that was in that
right,
plaza.
That was that, yeah.
And so we had 9,600 square foot, a performance stage, but we had video game players, we had, listening stations, and we had so many albums, CDs, cassettes, and a full-fledged used bookstore, and it was a blast. And dang, if I could have hung on to when my kids were, because they both loved all that stuff, but they were so young when that happened, and not to be too disparaging to Latonia, but it was not the place to put a business where you kind of needed, real readers and real fans, and it turned into too much of a, dollar paperback thing like that, and it just, the rent was crazy, and the synergy bill was crazy, so it was just tough to maintain that. But if we'd have done it a few years earlier, who knows what would have happened.
Yeah, I know there's not even a department store down there anymore.
Oh, no.
That whole shopping center is kind of
and used
empty.
bookstores have gone away because, again, books on tape and Kindles, and bookstores are tough. They've how many bookstores there used to be? Now there's so few. I promise you, lots of things that, like say in the '90s, where the latest John Grisham would sell millions and millions. I can't imagine it does. Whoever the John Grisham is of 2023 is going to sell that. Look what DVDs used to sell. I mean, heck, they would be ads in the Super Bowl. Shrek's coming out on DVD, or Spider-Man's coming out on DVD, and they would do millions of sales times whatever, 20, 30, 40 bucks, as much as they did on the theatrical release. You're never going to see that again either, because that's all Netflix and all the other streaming services. So obviously more than just my business has changed as far as physical product, but I have way too many used DVDs down there. I have way too many used CDs down there. I wish I had more used albums down there, but still pretty darn good. And again, physical product is how, as long as there's a Phil's, that's what I'll always do.
No, I love streaming. I do. I like the portability. I remember even like when iPods came out, and it's like, oh, it's 160 gig. Like, I can't fit my whole collection on there still. Like, want something where it's kind of all in one. So I do stream, and I think I mainly use Tidal, but I think on Apple Music, at least I can use all my stuff that I have backed up. So all my bootleg stuff that I bought over the years, so I just have it on my phone. And I think even for the monthly subscription cost of $10 or whatever it is, I'm still the guy that's going to the store to buy the new stuff that I love, like, because you can't buy it all. Or like I was saying earlier on, like going to my aunts or uncles, like, oh God, what can I scour through their thing real fast just to have something new at my fingertips or something new to listen to. So I do love streaming for that, and I'd clutter up my cards with CDs, then you pop one out and put it in the wrong disc or jewel case and throw it in the back seat and grab another one.
But the streaming services are great for exposure, and I wish more people use that to find things, because again, when an album's $25, $30, $35 and you can listen to it before you buy it, heck yeah, you're not taking a chance. I took thousands of chances in my youth, but I'm taking chances for $2, $3, not $25, $30. And lots of times, oh, I love this record. Other times I'm going, oh, this is awful. And you could get half your money back the next week when you go by there. These kids and these young consumers now don't have that option. So I understand, obviously, if you can, okay, I'm going to try this band by blah, 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 and listen to it first. Oh, I like it enough to buy it. That's great. But unfortunately, they like it enough, and nothing else in your life is free. So you turn out, music, the stream, $10. Again, I tell you all the time, if I was 17 years old, when I would go up to Moles and Ozark as a kid working, and you could tell me that, A, I'm going to have something that I have with me at all times. It's not my wallet or my car keys, but I'm going to have something that never, ever, ever isn't by my side. And on it can be any song I've ever found and heard. I'd have sign me up immediately.
Yeah, any book now.
Sure.
It's all there.
Yeah, there's not a chance in the world I wouldn't have done it. So I can't be that merchant that whines about, people doing it that way, because heck yeah, if it's available for you, again, nothing else in your life is free. So why wouldn't you? So that's where the industry really screwed up years ago, by fighting a lot of things that would have kept people in stores longer, but that's another time.
Kind of like when Blockbuster thought Netflix was a terrible idea.
Correct. And when record stores, or record labels rather, said, oh, we don't want to have CD singles, why? You only make $1. Well, it gets people in the store, and you can put anything you want to in the liner notes, or you open up this CD single of a hit, and you could have ads for anything else you sold, and you're reaching consumers that actually took their time to come in a store. But no, you said no, and now look how fast your industry went south. I mean, remember the ads for the 2-tray burners, in CDs, and
yeah.
Sheryl Crow, Dwight Yoakam, they're saying, oh yeah, you can, perfect quality. Excuse me, all it is someone buys one and you're never going to have that sale again. It was absurd. But the record labels have made so many mistakes over the years. That's it's the same thing. You remember the home taping is killing music things that used to be on all those albums back in the day? They would kill to have that problem again. Would kill. But
And it's like that FBI warning got bigger and bigger.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I was even thinking like the kid or the first person on the street that had like the CD burner. Like, okay, cool. Still didn't have a job yet, so still too young. What can I get out of his collection? Oh, you have, Rage Against the Machine or whatever. It's like, and then he'd be like, $5 a CD.
Right.
I'll just save, $5 more and go buy the real thing.
And Dave, that became the biggest problem this business faced because, back in the 90s, I can't put in words how much physical media sold, but then as soon as it became easy to copy it and not have it lose any fidelity, so people would buy the latest urban or the latest whatever and set up, folding chair and a folding table right down the street from record store, and people know. We come in, oh yeah, you get this for blank CDs for maybe $1 or $2 easily. Now blank CDs are then a few years later they were free, and they practically gave them to you to get you into Best Buy, and and that just crushed the industry. It's just, again, if one person buys it and the next 10 can spend $1 and you can't tell the difference when it's in your player, whether it's the one you bought from Phil's or the one you bought from the entrepreneur on the street, trouble.
Except I'm the goofball that wants to read the notes.
Well, sure, but again, $1 or $2 or $3 or $4 versus 15,
because you can't buy it all.
Right, and you can't tell the difference either. So where they became a problem was when there was no difference in quality, because obviously, recording onto a XL2 Max L or a TDK whatever.
Did that too.
You had right, but you had issues, moving parts, surface noise on the record, lots of things. Putting in the the one you bought and putting in the blank on the tray, 12 inches below it, pushing play. 2 minutes later, you A/B them, you can't tell the difference. And for everybody like yourself that appreciated liner notes, the rest of the people saying, "I just want the music, man."
Yeah,
and they get it.
Or the first person I saw, like, I was at his house. He always had CDs, but one of the Modest Mouse records from 10 or 12 years ago, he's like, "Oh, it came out today. I'll just here real quick." And I was like, "It was like $10." I said, "I got it at Circuit City for like $9."
Right.
And I said, "You don't even have the notes?" He's like, "Yes, I do. Hang on, it's downloading the PDF." I'm like,
crazy. But again, so the labels did not have the foresight to see some of this coming, and they could have at least slowed the process. And now, record labels are not, they don't mean anything.
I'm so glad I'm from the generation where I have $20, my buddy has $20. We each buy 2 different CDs, and then we don't have CD burners yet, so we had to dub them onto cassette until we had the money to scrape up, to buy the next thing.
Because when you stop and think about how so many people have got their music that means the world to them, because that's one thing I love about being in the same place for so long, that people will come in and they'll be 40, 50 something, and they'll say, and they'll be in with kids, and they said, "Man, I came in your place when I was a kid, or when I couldn't drive." Oh, you just dropped that. You said, you just got your license and came down to one of those things.
Yeah.
And people say this all the time. But, I tell my kids, I said, it would be nothing for a carload of 4 people to pull up and 3 of them to buy the same cassette. That would never happen in the last 10 years. Like, say, my store in Fort Mitchell had a really nice indie rock thing, and we had all the stuff on Lookout and all these cool labels, and super smart kids, they're buying buying the product for me. Heck, one still works at the best store in Cincinnati. But people would come from all around to shop at Phil's because they knew that Billy and Shane and those guys stocked the right things.
Yeah.
And they would come in and 3 kids would buy Green Day, Kerplunk, or 3 kids would come in and buy the same cassette. Never happened again, but again, they all wanted it, and you all had to have it, and so it was crazy how that would work. And now, 12 o'clock Thursday night, everything goes out to anybody that's on one of the services, and Friday morning at 12, everything's out there, and if you subscribe to this thing, you get the new releases of anything, and there it is. Hey, it's coming out soon, or the 2 craziest words in our business, midnight sale. We had some of those back in the day, and people would get all crazy for when something would come out. Now that's gone too, because it's just these are all things that were big part of what made record stores cool back in the glory days, and that can never ever be replicated.
I remember some midnight runs to Meyer because it was the only place that was open at midnight.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, like, this comes out tomorrow. It's Monday night. Let's cruise up there at midnight and see if their shipment came in yet.
Which it probably did, because if I had $1 for every time I saw, "Don't put this out till such and such," and the tags are still on the boxes when they're already out at those kind of places, I'd get all riled up. But nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. You think they're more hardcore about it now than they were in yesteryear?
Oh, good gosh, no. The other way around. No.
Oh, for real?
Oh, yeah. Why would you now? It's gonna be free Friday morning at midnight. So why in the world would they care? I mean, like I'm pretty good. Certainly, if it's a big release, I won't put it out till Friday. But like something small on a regular label, no reason not to.
Yeah.
I don't get in trouble for that. But they're crazy because that's one day if someone buys it that they don't do it free. There's so many sites still that, because again, once it became, I won't say easy, but once it became possible to not have to spend, sites come and go. But there's plenty of them that you don't have to even subscribe to Apple or Spotify for and get free. And people, especially certain genres, hard rock stuff. And so no, I don't think they would be too worried about it now compared to the old days. But also the old days, almost every store had what was called SoundScan too, where you'd scan when you saw it. That's how they figured out how much stuff was selling, and that's also how they beat the system. And I don't believe some of the numbers they did, but then if you scan something before a street date, you're in trouble. You wanted to scan things so you would still be called a cool store, and the more you sold, the more promos you might get, and things like that back in the day. And obviously, it wasn't an exact science, and it was scammable like anything else in this business. But again, you could rat yourself out by scanning something before street date. So you never did that.
So 40 plus years into the record store business, either working or owning your own, what the heck do you listen to all day?
That's back to the I don't have to answer anybody. Obviously, a lot of times it's what I just bought from somebody. I mean, I keep a bunch of stuff in my office that I want to get to, but a lot of things I say, I love this. I've got to listen to it once before it goes out. And that's kind of a silly mentality. It's good because I know I like it, but also sometimes I'm not hearing other things. But I'm pretty much too old to learn new tricks, I think. And so I rock harder than I ever used to. One of my favorite customers comes in once a week with a couple things, and we listen to it. And I make my own, kind of like what I call mixtapes, but only on CD, because I don't need to bring stuff home. It's better as the owner to, if a used CD comes in, it should hit the floor. But I make theme CDs, lots of different, all kinds of different genres, and that kind of keeps me sane. And I do that, and so I listen and put stuff on those kind of CDs, whether it be hard rock or jazz or bluegrass instrumentals. I mean, I've got so many different theme CDs, but I never know what I'm going to hit. But a lot of times it's what just came in, and I say, oh gosh, I've got to hear that first Yvonne again, even though I've heard it 1,000 times. But before I put it out, I have to hear it again. Or we all have those, those things
stuff that comes in. I forgot all about this. You threw this in.
Or I haven't heard it in a while and I love it, things like that. So, but I have a lot of time to fill. I'm there 7 days a week, most weeks, and so there's plenty of time to listen. And I don't. I play nothing but CDs because I couldn't get the XM to work in the store. I tried.
You have a little carousel, right? So you can load up 5 and.
Well, I just do one at a time. I could, I guess, yeah, but it's just again, there's really no rhyme or reason to, and people comment on it all the time. Last time I was in, you're banging, Phil. This time it's mellow jazz, or whatever. So it's like, it's not really mellow jazz, but it's cool jazz. And but again, no rhyme or reason.
Is stuff come in that you don't sell? Like, oh my God, this is like, or is it beyond that at this point?
Well, again, 43 years of knowing what to do. I mean, I've got a category in every style of music, album and CD. So if you're a fan of just about anything, I probably have some stuff there. Obviously I wish used hard rock records were more plentiful. I wish, but I've got stuff in everything. So I don't think there's really anything that I wouldn't take a chance on. I don't, just don't have to pay, don't pay a whole lot for some of this stuff because, again, realistically, a lot of this stuff is going to be there when they bulldoze Phil's down. There's never, there's no way you could ever sell this stuff.
But I mean, is there something that comes in where like you get to be the collector and like, oh my God, I've looked for this forever? Or is that like long past?
Sure. That used to be, almost fist fights between record store employees when promos would come in or something big like that. At my age and how I've heard now, I don't think there's anything that would, I don't think there's any holy grails for me that I haven't. But again, I'd rather turn it than have it sit on a shelf at my house where I'm pretty much musiced out when I get home. I tend to, watch, better TV shows or way too much sports than. I listen to the sound down a lot of times because the older I get, the crabbier I get towards some of these sports announcers. But I don't listen to as much at home near as much as I did years ago because I don't. Okay, for a lot of years you would take turns if there's 3 people working, that kind of thing. It's a monopoly now. It's me. So, no, and when Eric's there, I tend to hog the CD player. So I don't listen to as much when I get home. But
have you ever had anything came in that like just, oh, this is so cool, or I've never...
Oh, sure. Yeah, or you've never seen before, but absolutely. And then you look it up and you figure out what it's worth, and someone, goes all crazy. It's great. Truthfully, like I said, the beauty of the store is you never know what's going to come in, because a lot of people know, what Phil's is, because I've been around for so long, and sometimes people say, well, I hear you buy records, and you might see some cool stuff. But that's the same with any stores. They have, good customers that tell people, and you hope that awareness is still there for physical product, because nothing's worse than when people say, oh yeah, I had a bunch of records and threw them out, or I had a bunch of CDs and threw them out. Well, they're valuable to somebody. And that's the part that kind of crushes you sometimes when you hear stories about that. But or fires, or flood damage, all that kind of stuff. You want to. It's almost like you want to make sure it gets to a good home.
Because even for all the stuff that there's a gazillion copies of, there's probably something in that collection that's like,
oh sure,
oh, that would have been the thing to have. Or
and sometimes you get people bring in stuff, and it's humdrum. What? Humdrum. How did you have this? Obviously diamonds in the rough. How in the heck did you have this? So, and that's fun for me. You never know what you're going to see, but you don't see as much as you used to, and it's getting harder and harder to find used albums. That's one thing, because it's what used to come into record stores now go to relatives and neighbors, because everyone's into it now. And we still obviously pay a fair buck for it, but a lot of times we just never see them, because now collections are going to the second generation from the family, things like that. So
sure, I was lucky enough to have the turntable when I was a kid, and everyone else had CDs and stuff. But even like people's parents or grandparents, like, oh, do you want these old records? And it's like there'd always be some cool stuff in there.
Oh, sure.
And maybe some of it's trashed and you junk it. Maybe some of it you try to trade in at the record store. But
and the other thing is, I won't put anything out on my store in any format if I can't guarantee the shape of it. And that being said, when people bring them in, I said, you've got some great titles here. It's going to have that surface noise. It's going to have that but some people don't care. A, don't have much space. B, I've kind of made it my business model not to put out non-guaranteeable things. But like around Christmas time, it happens all the time. People come in, oh, I love listening to this Christmas album because Grandma had it, and I love the snaps and the crackles and the surface noise, because it brings them back to a happier time. As the merchant, I can't bank on someone going back to a happier time with a scratchy record, but to your point, heck, some of these records are gems to people that might not be in the greatest shape, but mean something to them. And that's the beauty of music, because I think that's what's really making records happening again, is you can't multitask with them. If you put on a record in your room, you have to at least realize you're giving it some of your attention, because it's a lot harder to put a record on and you can't dance around or run around and blah 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 like you can a phone or whatever.
If you're doing laundry, you better get up in 20 minutes and flip that
kind
side.
of thing. So things like that. So it makes you actually listen now. So I think that's when people ask me all the time, why are records coming back, or did you know records are going to come back? When they went out in the late 90s, basically, they were making them so crummy. There was every other one would come back warped. They wanted that part of the business gone, because the CD is going to be a cash cow. I will not in any way, shape, or form tell you that I thought that records were coming back. I'd be lying to you. I'm glad they did, but I never saw that coming again. But when people say that, well, I just look at my two now, my kids. They'll put it on and they kind of have to stop what they're doing for a minute or 20 and listen, because again, it's turntable's a stationary thing. The phone isn't. Discmans aren't. Obviously anything else, iPods or thumb drive, any place you can move around, there you can do other things. Where the record, you're stopping, and if you stop and listen to music, there's an awful lot of great stuff that's if you really stop and listen.
Oh yeah,
it's
probably taught me the patience of, like, because I know everyone does playlists and this and that, or saying, I always be like, I would just throw the album on, 40, 45 minutes late, even if it is a CD or something, like, put the whole thing on. Generally don't skip through things. Actually, if I do skip, it's probably because it was on the radio so much that I'm just burnt on it.
And we all have that way of feeding our habit, whether it be 1 to 11 on a CD, or side A to side B on a record. And other people hit around, and that's the non-attention span person in the car that always there's all kinds of fans like that out there. So we all have our ways of enjoying what means something to us, which is someone's album or CD, whatever that they've made and we like.
Yeah, or on the record, you can tell when people did skip around, because you get some rough patches when you're trying to play it through.
Absolutely.
The coolest thing I brought for show and tell today, so I think when you're out in Highland Heights or Alexandria or whatever, I was in college, but I guess I got this when I was out of college. But somebody just like traded in their entire Beatle collection, like obsessive. I think the guy passed away or he was sick.
Mhm.
But I mean, there was like CDs and long boxes still sealed, like all this weird. Like I bought a ton of singles. I never buy singles, and a bunch of other stuff. But I bought the first McCartney record there, which I probably have 15 copies of, and probably more since then. But this one, and I've never seen one since, and I've never like found anything online about it. But this one has a poster. That
Wow.
seems legit, but I've never.
Well, that was the swag that was in records. Because I tell people all the time, you had 12 by 12 to catch someone's eye. Album cover art, that's why there's thousands of books on album cover art. And the labels' first runs, they would put in, value added, for lack of a better term. The Dark Side of the Moon had stickers and an album, or poster rather, the first couple runs. Now that sold a lot, so it's not the Holy Grail. That is something you don't see hardly at all.
I've never seen it.
Yeah, that's probably I don't think I have either. So that's probably the first run only, where it's lots of cool album art or album add-ons. But again, when you see people now selling stuff online, or I'll do it, I'll write down original, the inner sleeve, or original. There's lots of things I would shove in records, and that all absolutely adds to the resale value. Labels would put in things like, buy this record, or join the fan club. Things like that would be in the records. Things like that, or posters. They wouldn't do it on all of them, but
Some of the big ones, Plastic Ono Band, live piece in Toronto, you get a calendar.
sure.
Crazy.
But again, they would do them on the first runs, and the people that had the foresight to keep them in those records, then the record collectors see that. That's awesome, because that adds to what I always say, that a quality first run of McCartney album like that is going to go more than the reissue will, because of things like that.
Yeah, and then anytime I see one used in the bin, I've never seen a poster before. I've never seen a poster since, and it's like I only paid $8 for it. Crazy.
There you go.
So if anyone knows, if
Yeah.
anyone's seen this, let me know.
But there's so many things there, and there's been books written on what's in albums. I mean, people have, obviously that was meant to from the record label, but that's another thing you see when you go through records, that you see, people have whole books on things like that. Money stashed in it, love notes, seeds,
Yeah, I've heard that too.
things like that. So you never know what you're going to find in records.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you coming in. We'll go ahead and wrap this up. It's been great.
It's been fun.